Well, now it's my pleasure to introduce and welcome Mr. Tom Crotty, who is the director of the INEOS Group, with responsibility for corporate affairs and communications and the development of INEOS business in new territories. He joined INEOS in 2001, following a 20-year career with ICI. Tom is a board member of the European Chemical Industry Council, president of the European Petrochemicals Association, vice president of the Plastics Europe, and president of the UK Chemical Industries Association. Please join me in welcoming him. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Salam alaikum. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to talk a bit about what's changing in the feedstock world, and particularly the impact of US shale gas. And we're in an interesting position because the impact of that is outside the US for us as well as inside the US, in that we're bringing a lot of that gas into Europe now. A little bit about us, for those of you who don't know us. I won't go through this in a lot of detail, but we are spread around the world, about 105 sites, turnover about $54 billion. We are some upstream integration now. We own a few North Sea gas fields, as well as a couple of refineries, but we're fundamentally a petrochemicals company. This is not quite as impressive a growth chart as Dr. Al Sadoun put up for the Gulf, but it's not bad. We only started in 1998, and since that time we've grown fairly substantially. Our main presence is in Europe, and to a lesser extent in North America, a couple of very, very large integrated sites around the world. So a fairly traditional petrochemicals operation. Let me start by talking about US shale gas. People talk about the shale gas revolution. It is a good way to explain it because it is a revolution. This is the simple graph that shows how gas production in the US has increased since about 2004, 2006, dramatic growth across all of the major US shale plays. And if you actually look at one of those, the one that Graham mentioned earlier on, the Marcellus Shale, which is in Pennsylvania, close to where Graham's going to be building his new cracker, it's probably the most impressive. This one shale basin on its own in the US is now producing 15 billion cubic feet of gas a day. As a marker, the UK as a country consumes less than about half of that figure on a daily basis. So one play producing twice as much as the UK as a country consumes. So a very dramatic increase and truly a revolution. The impact of that, I think we all know, a major impact on pricing. Dramatic falls from prices back in 2008, in excess of $10 a million BTU, down to pricing today in the sort of $2.5 to $3 range. And that's mapped here against a marker, which is the UK's net balancing point price. You can see even with declines in the last couple of years in that price, US price is now half of the prices in the rest of Europe. So a major competitive challenge for the European petrochemical industry. Why is that important? Well, I think we all know, we're all in this industry. For pretty well every product in our range here that we produce, energy, which is the dark blue, represents at least half, if not more, of the total cost of manufacture. We get the energy piece wrong, the feedstock piece wrong, we don't have a business. So the fundamental impact of this on our business cannot be overstated. The impact on global economics, this is a curve I'm sure everyone's familiar with. This is simply the cumulative cost curve for ethylene. This was what it looked like back in 2005. You gentlemen here in the Middle East, significant competitive advantage relative to China, Western Europe, North America. Two things have changed since then because of shale gas. The first is the relative competitiveness of North America has changed dramatically, but also the shape of the curve has changed significantly as well. So it is a much steeper curve, where now the North American competitiveness is now significantly better. So we now have two low-cost centers, potentially for manufacture of petrochemicals, but also we have a major problem if you're sitting in Western Europe or indeed in the rest of Northern Asia for competitiveness. So massive challenges for us where we have 2/3 of our turnover based in Europe. What's the US industry response to this? Well, it's dramatic investment in petrochemicals. A cumulative investment of around $140 billion of planned spend between 2010 and 2020. A huge amount of new input going in there, a lot of new jobs as a result of that, 485,000 jobs according to ACC. It's going to add $80 to $120 billion of economic output to the US economy. This is just chemicals. Clearly you could repeat this for the steel industry, for the aluminium industry, all of the other industries that depend on competitive energy. So a dramatic change in an industry in the US where there had really been no investment for 20 years. That for Europe is a major competitive threat. This is the relative position of Europe and the US in terms of chemical volumes, and there you see the likely impact of that dramatic investment in US chemicals, with Europe staying pretty flat. And is it going to change anytime soon? We don't believe so. This was the IHS forecast from about a year ago, which is that there's a cap and collar likely to apply on the gas price in the US that's going to keep it within that $3 to $4 range going forward. Basically, as the price rises, you'll get fuel switching. As the price falls, you'll get fuel switching between coal and oil. So we think there's going to be a pretty steady gas price in the US for the foreseeable future. Good news for Shell and those building new crackers in North America. So what can the European industry do about this? We can do a number of things. We can rationalize, and there's been quite a bit of that going on. We can drive performance improvement, and that is an ongoing basis. Everyone is driving performance improvement. Or we can try and access improved feedstock and lower energy costs. And we can do that in two ways, by importing feedstock from North America and by trying to develop that feedstock locally. And as a company, those are the two things that we have been working on very, very actively over the last couple of years. So let me tell you a bit about them. Start with the first of those, which is the import of shale gas. We have, I'm sure many of you are aware, developed a new project to build what we are referring to as a virtual pipeline between the east coast of North America and indeed the US Gulf into Europe. We have manufactured, along with our partners Evergas, 8 of these new ethane gas carriers, new class of ship, Dragon class ships. They both transport and run on ethane. First ocean-going vessels to actually run on ethane as a fuel. Gives us a lot of flexibility, also reduces their CO2 impact. Those are, we have 6 in commission and 2 more in the yard waiting to be finished. So there'll be 8 in total. We have 2 gas crackers in Europe. Firstly in Norway, Rafnes, about a 600,000 ton capacity. And we have made significant investment at that asset to build a new ethane storage tank. We had one already, we built a second one, and all of the associated equipment that goes with that. And Grangemouth in Scotland, which is our other gas cracker, about 700,000 tons capacity, with downstream PE and PP. Again, a flexible gas cracker. Another new import facility, more complex project there. Very, very large tank. It's Europe's largest ethane storage tank. New jetties and a lot of pipeline infrastructure. So all of that was completed for September. What that means, I think, is we're seeing a fundamental change. Good news if you're in the transportation, the shipping transportation industry, a whole new industry starting up here, which is in the movement of ethane around the world. So pre-2016, this is what we had, was the only real ethane movements around the world were within Norway, from one side of the country to the other, or a little bit going into Sweden. From the second half of 2016, a significant change. Both our imports from the US Gulf into Europe and also Reliance doing the same, bringing that product in. So we've got a much more complex situation now in Europe. We have Norwegian ethane still flowing out into the United Kingdom, as well as into Norway and Sweden, but also these major long-haul transportations. Why is that important? Well, the North Sea and security of supply for European industry is a major problem. If you look at pretty much every hydrocarbon that we have, the energy import dependency for Europe is significantly high, anything between 30, 40% and 80%. So Europe has a growing problem as an importer of energy. The North Sea is in significant decline. This is the North Sea decline curve. This is Wood Mackenzie's data. Dramatic drops since 2000 in the amount of gas coming out of the North Sea. We are therefore driving for a major development in Europe of Europe's own shale gas resource, which we believe to be significant. And we're starting that project in the UK for political rather than geological reasons. The political reason being that the UK government is one of the only governments in Europe that is strongly supportive of developing indigenous shale gas. We have significant resistance in Germany, in France, both of whom would have significant resources of their own. So we're concentrating on the UK. Within the UK, there is a very significant amount of shale available through the northern part of the country. And we believe that the very survival of the chemical industry in the country depends on the long-term development of this resource. What we've done with importing shale gas buys us time. It buys us 15, 20 years. But no one can forecast what will happen beyond that. So getting energy independent becomes even more important. Shale gas, what is it? Well, basically natural gas trapped in sedimentary rock. It's the source rock for conventional gas, conventional oil and gas. Conventional oil and gas is simply leakage from the shale layer that's occurred over millennia. What we're doing with shale development is tapping into that source rock and stimulating it to release the treasures buried within. Talking about wells that are relatively deep, 2 to 3 kilometers deep. The typical construction is to drill vertically and then turn into a horizontal drill to follow the shale seam for another 2 or 3 kilometers with multiple linings to protect watercourses, etc. And then once you've done that, to hydraulically fracture the rock by injecting at very high pressure basically water with a small inclusion of sand. The sand is simply there as what's called a proppant. It is to prop open the cracks that you then make in that shale, and a few additives to ensure that the lubrication of the flow works and you don't get build-up of bacteria or other problems. So that's basically the process. It's relatively simple. It's been very well developed in North America. A typical well cost in North America now is between $5 and $7 million to develop one of these wells. So it's a very different scenario to conventional in terms of cost and speed. It now takes about 3 weeks to drill out one well. It takes about 1 week to frack it. So that's a very different environment than the one we're used to. In terms of the additives that go down there, there's nothing, there's been a lot of talk of the nasty things, the nasty chemicals that we're injecting into these wells. There's nothing untoward. There's nothing that we would put down these wells that you would not find in most homes in terms of scale inhibitors or biocides, friction reducers, very mild acids. This is a typical drilling rig. They tend to be extremely mobile. They move from site to site. As I said, it only takes 3 weeks to drill each well. You would typically drill 8 or 10 wells on one pad. A pad is probably about the size of this area from the front row across here. That would be typically the size of a pad, and you would drill 8 or 10 wells on that pad. And then that drill would move to the next site. You then bring in your hydraulic fracture spread. This is a typical frac spread. This one was actually in Poland. A lot of lorry-mounted high-pressure pumps running in series to create that very high-pressure injection of water and indeed sand. And when you're finished, you're left with nothing much, really. This is about all you'd see on the surface from a distance. So I took a group of journalists out to the Marcellus Shale a couple of months ago, and I challenged them to find a production site, which they failed to do because it is an invisible industry. Can we do this safely? Yes, we can, but there is a huge job to do within Europe in convincing the general public that this is a safe activity, because it's taking place on land rather than out at sea where no one has to worry about things. We'll never convince everyone, but our view is we actually have to start this process in order to get people comfortable. There's a huge amount of third-party evidence to support the fact we can develop this very, very safely. Our plan is to work with local communities to do this. We're very committed to doing that. We're consulting with communities. We're spending a huge amount of our time and effort sitting down with every community to explain these facts very, very simply, and to offer them a significant share in the resource. In North America, this is easy, because in North America, if you own land, you also own the minerals under that land. In Europe, it's totally different. The government own the minerals that lie under the land. So we have committed to offering the first 6% of the gas value coming out of the ground back to the landowners and the local communities. And that would be a very significant amount of money. We're talking about that 6%. We estimate we would be giving away in the UK about £2.5 billion. One shale gas area, which is a 100 square kilometre, would generate just under £400 million to that local community. So that would make a significant difference to their lifestyle. It's our view that once we start this process and once we start paying these amounts of money, the neighbouring community will then say, that looks pretty good, we'll have some of that, please come and join us. So I think we will, over time, change people's mindsets by proving this is safe, by proving it doesn't destroy their environment, and by giving them a significant share in the benefit. So in conclusion, we believe that gas is going to be needed in Europe for many decades to come, not just for our industry, but also for home heating, for renewable technology backup. When the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining, you're still going to need gas. We think obviously it has a major environmental benefit. It's replacing coal as a fuel, and it's half the CO2 emissions of coal. We think shale gas will help. It will supply that need. We can preserve jobs in the industry. It will be very intensely regulated, but if we're providing good benefits to the communities, then I think we can succeed in this over the long term. Thank you very much indeed.